Hi, my name is Jim Burns. I'm going to talk about how to keep your mouth shut and the welcome mat out with your kids.
Welcome to the Redirect Podcast. We appreciate you joining us and listening to our conversation about finding your purpose in retirement.
Hey, Dale and Adam, I got a question for you. You guys have adult children, right?
We do.
All right. Why don't we go around the horn here a little bit so our listeners can understand what our family dynamic is? And Dale, why don't I start with you?
Great. I have two adult boys. One's 34, one's 32. They were both in Seattle for a while. Went to school out on the West Coast, Whitman College, and started their careers in Seattle. And they both have migrated back to the Midwest. I've been able to get one back to Cincinnati. So my oldest, Matt, is with Nestle up in Cleveland, up in Shaker Heights. He lives up there, and he's got one child. So I have a grandkid with him. The other one is back here in Cincinnati. He lives 10 minutes away from me, and he's married and also has one child. So I am not only, a parent to two adult kids, I am a grandparent to two grandkids, and one on the way. So three. And I'm in that stage where I've spent a lot of time grandparenting. And Jim, I can't wait to talk to you a little bit about that.
And Dale, how many years you been married?
Fran and I have been married for 35 years. It's a big year this year, 35. So
very cool. Very cool. Adam, what about you?
So my situation is a little bit of a Brady Bunch. I have all of the parts except for Alice, the housekeeper. I had two boys, and my second wife had two girls. My first marriage was awesome, 25 years. I've been remarried now for 7 years, and the blending of families, I don't think it could have gone better. It's just been a blessing to see how my wife has taken my sons as her own, and my stepdaughters have received me as well as they have. And I have 4 grandkids and with a blended family, and it's just such a blessing. I don't think I could have scripted it to go any better. It's a blessing of God, honestly.
That's great. That's great. Well, myself, been married to my lovely bride for 40 years. Going to be 40 years this June. Very excited about that. We've got my 3 sons. All right. So we got my oldest son, Ryan, is 37 years old. Middle son, Adam, 35, who is married. Been married now for going on 4 years, and to his wife, Rochelle. And then my youngest son, Alex, who is 32 years old. So got 3 boys, one daughter-in-law, which I'm very excited to have a pink one in the family outside of my lovely wife, but no grandkids. Don't have any grandkids yet. Sort of living through my nieces and nephews because they have my great nieces and nephews. So that makes me great Uncle Curt, which I am. So, so we're very excited because we got Jim Burns here today, who's going to help us sort of unpack some things in dealing with adult children. So why don't I turn it over to Adam? He can get this rolling for us today.
So let me tell you a little bit about Jim. Today's friend of the Redirect Podcast, Jim Burns, is the founder of Homeward. He speaks to thousands of people around the world each year, has more than 3 million resources in print in over 20 languages. His popular Homeward with Jim Burns podcast is on all major podcast platforms. Jim writes and speaks primarily on the values of Homeward, which are strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. Some of his most popular books are A Student's Guide to Sexual Integrity, Doing Life with Your Adult Children, which we're going to unpack a little bit today, and Teaching Your Children Healthy Sexuality, Confident Parenting, and Creating an Intimate Marriage. Jim and his wife, Kathy, live in Southern California and have 3 grown daughters, 3 sons-in-law, and 4 grandchildren. Jim, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Hey, it's great to be with you. You guys are young whippersnappers, even though we're talking about retirement, because I've been married 50 years to Kathy.
Wow.
And
did you get married when you were 10?
Exactly. Actually, she's 6 months older, and never once has anybody thought she was older than me. They've actually thought I was her father at times, and that's not a good story, but, there you go. But great to be with you, and you have the American family, because you all have a blended family. There's special needs there. Adams, yours is interesting because typically we don't hear that the blended family goes as well as you're saying. Yeah. And so you've got a great thing going there. You've got what's going on all over the world in many ways. It's not just the husband and wife white picket fence, and they were married for 50 years, which we have. We're really about 7% of the American population right now, Kathy and I.
That's awesome. Hey, can I kick this off, Curt? I wanted to ask Jim. You started, Jim, with the words, keep your mouth shut and the welcome mat. I want for our listeners to hear a little bit more about that. I want you to talk a little bit more.
Well, Kathy and I, as we raised our 3 daughters, so different than Curt, we had girls, so we had no hormones or drama in our life. And as we were raising those girls, getting them through the teenage years, they moved into the adult years. Well, at least they said they're adults. At 18, they said, we're an adult. Treat us like an adult. And I'm going, wait, we're still paying for your college. We're paying for your cell phone. We're still paying for insurance. What do you mean? Start acting like it, right? But we had to learn pretty quickly that in many ways, we had to give our kids the passport to adulthood, even though they weren't always acting like adults. And to do that was also that these kids, our kids, and I think most adult kids, see giving advice, and especially unsolicited advice, as criticism. And we didn't ever mean it as that. We thought our advice was great. That's what we'd been doing for 2 decades of our life. And all of a sudden they looked up and kind of went, well, we don't really want this advice. And I go, wait, people pay me to give them advice. And they didn't want it. And what we found was that when we gave advice, especially unsolicited, they saw that as, you don't see me as all grown. And we didn't view it that way. Our motives were right. But I now found that we've had to learn to, keep our mouth shut many times and then also the welcome mat out. And that's how we're trying to live our life with our kids. We do pretty well. There's times when Kathy goes, you need to work on principle number 2, Jim. You just gave some unsolicited advice, but otherwise we do pretty good.
Well, I just want to say it's a great book. We have all 3 of us here are in a Thursday morning Bible study, and this book has been brought up many, many times. A lot of the gentlemen there are sort of our age, and we actually, a gentleman bought a number of books and has been handing it out to the group. And as a result, in reading this, we've reached out to you, and we're really excited that you're here to talk about that, because there's a lot of things to unpack. And even your first principle, when you talk about the role of the parent must change. Can you talk more about that? Because as soon as I read that, it was like so common sense, so real when you referenced it to like a job description. So could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I say is your job as a day-to-day parent, you're fired. And, we don't see it that way. They still call us mom and dad. But the point is that we are kind of fired as a day-to-day parent. And so the job description does change. And part of that job description is we have to reinvent the relationship. And here's the deal. I mean, our kids don't know how to be adults. We never really trained them that. We should probably do a better job of that. Our goal is to help them become responsible adults, but we're just trying to get them through the teen years, if we're honest with it. And then, but part of that job description is that they didn't know what they were doing, but we also don't know what we're doing. So part of that job description is for us to hand over that, passport to them. And, I find that for a lot of parents, moms in a different way than dads, I'm being general on that, they experience some real grief because, their identity was wrapped in that. I say, this wasn't in Doing Life with Your Adult Children, but a book I wrote on living in the empty nest, that my wife was the sun and we had 3 kids revolving around the sun as planets, and at home, pretty much me too. And all of a sudden, those planets were gone. And Kathy had to look up one day and go, so what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Kathy, very good career, lots of good things in her life, but her main focus and emphasis was that. So that became part of having to learn how to change and reinvent the relationship. So that's the principle. And it's the principle literally is you're fired as a day-to-day parent. We want to keep nosing in there, and sometimes for very good reasons. Now, Curt, I always say with a preface that if there's a special need child someplace, some of that principle doesn't work as easy in that case, obviously. And so sometimes kids who have special needs or kids they could be on the spectrum, or they could have ADD, or they could have all kinds of things. Sometimes you got to, even as an adult, move in, but that's really not the norm to keep our mouths. We do want to try to learn to keep our mouth shut.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I had a conversation with Jackie the other day, in the sense that, with our two other boys, Ryan and Adam, they've got their lives, they're adults. Yeah. We've laid that foundation. We rented them from God back in the day, and they're still his,
Love
right?
It. Yeah.
So we're there, and it is so hard to hold back things that you want to say.
Yeah.
Because that's how you feel about it. But then again,
Right.
I look at Jackie and I'm like, with Alex, we're still parenting.
Yes.
We haven't had that empty nest experience, because
Right.
we're still parenting. Now,
Right.
it's a part of our responsibility to sort of help him emerge
Yeah.
out of that. But it is so hard. So we've got two rules going on here in this house,
Right.
so to speak.
Right.
But now we're trying to make Alex a little bit more engaged with how we're treating with Ryan and Adam as well,
Yeah.
because he is an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does change, even with anybody. If somebody's still living in our house, it does change. It just changes in a different manner. And so I think you said that really well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, talking about change, I'm the guy with 2 grandkids.
Yeah.
So I bring all my great parenting skills, Jim, to their house.
Oh.
And what an interesting dynamic that has become.
Right.
Because all of a sudden, I watch them start parenting, and wait a second, that's not how I parented you.
Right.
How come
Right.
you're parenting them like that? And I really had to make a hard stop and step back and say, look, they're the parents.
Right.
I got to respect that. I got to love them, continue to love them to death, love them for how we brought them up. And I think if we've done a really good job of parenting them, but their dynamic of those two together and how they're parenting, and I come in looking like, wait a second, I'd put that little kid in timeout. What do you mean? I would do this. I would do that.
Right.
Help me.
Yeah.
Help me.
Well, I think you said
the
it
way
so.
I'm thinking about this.
I think you said it so well. Again, we aren't in charge anymore, and so now we become the greatest cheerleader we can for our kids. We move the relationship from, again, kind of being in control when they were younger, semi-control when they're teens, to really being a mentor. And so I find that those conversations when they're our kids or our own children are in the heat of the battle and thinking about something with their with our grandkids, sometimes they'll ask us, but that's only because, we've now kind of earned the right. So yeah, it's hardest thing, because I wouldn't be raising my kids that way. Last Sunday, our one daughter goes to church at the same church we go to, and last Sunday we looked for him, we didn't see him, so we said to James, my oldest, he's 9. So what'd you guys do? And he said it was a great day. We went to the beach. We live in Southern California. We went to the beach. And I was like, seriously. and Kathy and I had this conversation, but we also had to realize that was a conversation that we were not going to have with our daughter. And because, again, she's raising, she takes those kids to church. They go to vacation Bible school. They love Sunday school. We're in that great stage. But there's just things that they do. Feeding wise, we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're feeding that. That kid needs a timeout, and we're not responsible for it. Now, we watched the kids. Kathy became a fully engaged grandma the day that we heard James was in mommy's tummy. And so she actually retired. And today we'll have the kids until 7 tonight. And, there are times when we have to kind of put in the parent thing, or we'll have mass pan. We've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. They can go crazy. We'll find them up on the top of the tree, or we'll find them, sneaking chocolate, which they did 2 days ago. And so there are times when we have to be, strong like that. But as soon as the parents come in, we're now number 2. And I think that's important. I'm laughing that I'm seeing my girls, who they had pushback with us as teens. They thought we were too strict. Everybody else has seen this movie. Everybody in the entire universe has a cell phone but me at 9, which is not true. But the point I was going to say is I'm watching them kind of also imitate some of the stuff. I'm like, I'm laughing that she's taken on some things that I think she pushed back on too. So I think you get both. for Kathy and I, we were raised in dysfunctional families. So my dad was an alcoholic and a good guy. He was a functioning alcoholic. He was a good guy, but again, he didn't do, intimacy and all those kinds of things. He came to all my games and stuff like that. And Kathy's family was just also quite dysfunctional, more dysfunctional probably than mine. And so we decided that we had to either recover or repeat. And so part of our parenting was recovering. The Bible says that you inherit the sins of a previous generation to the third and fourth generation. I wasn't going the way of my dad. She wasn't going the way of her family, but we still had enough of that we went, no, we're going to put a stake in the ground and we're going to recover. And literally just recently, one of my daughters, recently, 2.5 years recently, she got married, my middle child, and we were at a villa in Italy of all places, tough place to get married. And I looked out and the daughters were all hanging. There was a pool. The daughters were all hanging together. The grandkids were having a good time. The son-in-laws we adore. And I said, you know what, Kathy? I think we've changed the trajectory of our family background. And I don't mean that we did it all perfectly. And I'm not saying that every decision they all make is perfect, but I think it's possible for us to do that. And in the grandparenting years, we get even a second shot at it. So like with James, this kid is unbelievable. And I've read the children's Bible to him through 3 times. I didn't do that with my kids. We were busy, we were doing all this stuff, but now that we have time. So I even find that a lot of times people who are, say, in that retirement stage, instead of just, spending all of their time in Maui where your son should be instead of Cincinnati, no offense. But going to Maui and moving there and not being involved with the kids. I mean, our deal is we're going to be involved with those grandkids because we've got legacy now. And we're much more serious about that kind of stuff than we were with our kids.
Isn't it true that you get to parent your now young parent adult child?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You get to offer them guidance and
No, you do. You change
sometimes indirectly, sometimes directly in how you interact with your grandchildren. It indirectly gives advice on parenting.
Right. I was trying to get Huxley. This is on the another family of ours. So Huxley is 4.5, and I was getting him to put some blocks in, and I timed him. I said, "Okay, Huxley, I think you can do this. The world's record is 2 minutes. I'm making this up. I go, the world's record is 2 minutes, and so I get my phone out, and Huxley just came through perfectly. Matt, my son-in-law, goes, "Whoa, I've tried everything, bribing. I'm telling him he was going to get a SWAT, all these things. You just nailed it. I'm taking on your way." So I'm not saying that worked all the time with my girls, but for Huxley, that one time it did work, and he was excited about it. But the point I'm saying is we are able now with our kids to model some things because, it's not our first rodeo. So
I think it's for one of the dynamics that I think is really interesting for me that I'm dealing with is my oldest grandkid, who's 3. I got to see him once a quarter. I mean, he was never always here, so I've really kind of tiptoed into that.
Yeah.
My younger one, who's 7 months, lives 10 minutes, and I'm in her life every other day.
Big difference,
and what a difference, so next week, 2 weeks from now, Jim, I'm going up there. We're babysitting him for a week and a half while they take off.
Yeah.
Now I'm, hey, I want to respect their parenting methods, but we're now one-on-one, and now it's going to be a really interesting dynamic of how we do it one-on-one with them on vacation.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. And what's interesting about that is that when we found with our daughter, Christy, she moved from Southern California to Dallas for 1 year with the kids. And we actually were fortunate. I speak a lot, so I fly to Dallas, through Dallas, feels like weekly right now. But I would always stop and I would see the kids, and we felt like we got more and better time with them because we were doing the kind of thing you're doing with the week and a half, or we would do something, on a weekend or whatever. And but it had to definitely be more proactive. I've got a good friend named Wayne Rice who wrote a book called Long Distance Parenting, and he gives great ideas, just on the real practice of that. And I don't have long distance. I have a 1.5 hour drive with traffic to Los Angeles, where our other kids are, both of our other daughters. And I've just found there's this amazing thing. It was invented, I think Al Gore invented it in 1984. It's called the World Wide Web. And so, FaceTime, I FaceTime them a lot. I'll just pick up the FaceTime thing. And, sometimes the kids are playing and they pay no attention. Sometimes you get your own child I end up talking to one of the guys about a sports team here in LA or something. But I just find that, we've had to be more proactive with the ones who are a little bit farther away. But it still can work. I mean, their eyes light up. The kids' eyes light up. Little Bodie, who's a year and a half, he was trying to kiss the phone. And my daughter, Heidi, she was like, Bodie, don't put your tongue on the phone. Right. Because, he's 1.5. But, that was cute for me. And it was cute. I was just glad he wanted to see me because, sometimes the kids are like, hey, Papa Jay, awesome. Good to see you. And they're gone, so.
Hey, Jim, you mentioned in the book, you list in this chapter, this principle, that there's practical ideas for influencing your grandkids. And you said, offer grace constantly. Yeah. It's the most powerful tool in your bag.
Yeah.
Why don't you share a little bit on that?
Yeah. Well, again, I don't know about you guys, but when Kathy and I were raising our kids, and this was our specialty, I mean, I've got a PhD in this stuff, and Kathy's got a degree in early childhood development. So this was we were lost and we were struggling and we were frustrated and the kids wouldn't act the right way and whatnot. So we see that now firsthand with our own daughters and their husbands. And so we just need to make sure that we're doing, I just say, that is so normal. Oh my gosh. You're doing a great job. So my job, I believe now, is to be the grace giver to one of my daughters was really, really, she was just struggling recently in terms of some of her motherhood. She's a great mom, but she was just struggling and she thought she had done something goofy or something. I can't even remember what it was now. And my job was to say, no, you're an amazing mom. And I watched her move from her eyes kind of filled up with some tears to her eyes filling up with tears in a different way. It was like the tears where I'm frustrated to the tears where, thank you, So I think we need to really be those, people who offer a lot of grace because it's tough. I was just talking to somebody on the phone before I came on with you guys because I'm speaking at a program with a bunch of young moms on this week, actually. And I said, hey, I always start by just saying, you got the hardest job in the world. It's so, you're not getting enough sleep. How many of you slept all night? Half of the, women, don't put their hands up like I didn't sleep all night. So, I just talk about that. It's a hard time for connection, all that. So what they need from us is more cheerleading than the advice giving. And I think that's our job. Christy called me up at 7:45 this morning with the two older kids, and we're watching the kids this afternoon, which is the regular thing. And she goes, hey, we haven't been on date night for a couple of weeks. Can you guys, keep the kids through the date? I went, absolutely. I didn't even talk to Kathy because, I didn't know if she had plans, whatever, but I knew what Kathy would say. And she said, awesome. She goes, maybe we can go, they are really into Chick-fil-A right now. Maybe we should bring some Chick-fil-A, back, and maybe we should put it, and we don't do a lot of shows and things like that with them. They get plenty at their house. That's part of the us thinking they get too much of it. But she goes, maybe we can put on, there's a new little Christian show that they really seem to like. And so maybe we can put that show on too, and we can eat the Chick-fil-A and then I'll get some popcorn and whatever. And so we'll make it an event. Well, we want to do that. But part of that is Christy having the, or Steve, her husband, saying, will you guys, we jump at it anytime we can. I mean, there's times we can't, but yeah.
Guys, this might be a good chance to take a quick break. All right? We'll be right back. Hey there. If you're enjoying this episode, we've got a small favor to ask. Actually, it's a pretty big one. Take a moment to like and share this episode with your friends and family. Then, follow the Redirect Podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's quick, it's free, and it helps us keep bringing you great content every week. And if you really want to make a difference, drop us a 5-star review. Those reviews will help us spread the word and keep the community growing. So hit that follow button, share it with a friend, and let us know what you think. We really appreciate you guys. Now, let's get back to it. The principle you referenced earlier, principle number 2, that
it's a biggie.
Unsolicited advice is usually taken as criticism.
Yeah.
I got to admit, and it took me off guard because I I applied this concept in my professional world. I was just so delinquent or I was just so off base to not translate that
Yeah.
over to dealing with people that I love, that are
Right.
important to me, that are
Right.
very
Right.
close to me, right? I would coach my team and my subordinates and other managers and leaders. I would always tell them, listen for the question mark. If you don't hear the
Hmm.
question mark, you don't have to offer solutions.
Really good.
Be careful about offering solutions where you're not engaged to do so.
Yeah.
I taught that to professionals.
I get it.
I did not teach that to myself as it related to my own children.
So true. I get it. It's a whole
And it
different
caused
relationship.
such friction.
Yeah.
And to have my eyes opened, unfortunately, recently, about some
Right.
of those
Yeah.
about some of those details, as my kids get older,
Hmm.
I find it easier.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
nuance of granting grace or advice,
Yeah.
listening for some of that question, looking for
Yeah.
advice, and they're more comfortable with coming and specifically asking for advice with my older children. With the younger side of that, it's very different. They're much more independent and have life to prove to themselves.
Right. Right.
And so it's that I have to remind myself, listen for the question mark. If they're not asking, be careful about offering.
Yeah, so good. I need to write that down. I listen for the question mark, because that really is. I mean, and you know what? You just modeled what I actually even wrote about, because our job is to move them from dependence on us to independence. That could be financial independence. That could be, all kinds of things. They just need to become responsible. But in that process, we move from control to coaching. You use the word coaching and mentoring. And I found with my kids in those early years, what when I was getting my PhD, we called it latent adolescence. Today we call it emerging adulthood. But whatever you call it, those are the tougher ones. As they get older and they see that you've been actually applying some of these rules the best you can, then they're much more open to questions. My daughter, Christy, I was telling you that she asked about us watching the kids, but then she goes, hey, let me change the subject. Dad, do you have an extra couple minutes? And I said, yeah. She's driving to school. She teaches. And she goes, hey, I wanted to ask you about how I handle, and boom, we moved into more of a mentoring role, which I don't think I got as much when she was younger, But I think by keeping our mouth shut, then we get to move into that role. And I also think we sometimes just have to simply go, hey, can I ask for permission here to speak into that? Only Christy, who's my oldest, has said one time, not now, Dad. But the point being is they always, they'll go, yeah, but what they don't want is me to just barge in there and try to take over their life when I think I have the answers. And most of the time we do have the answers. That's the hard part about being a parent to an adult child.
Have you ever had conversations with your kids to sort of set the parameters or the guide rails for it, to say, hey, I will give advice when you ask me?
Yeah.
Or if I make a comment, I've had this conversation with my boys. I'm like, I'd love to have a conversation with you as a different type of person. I'm always going to be your dad. All right. So I'm always got that father role.
Right.
But I'd love to have the conversation with you as a peer or as a coworker or as a man. And in order to have a manly conversation with your son, you still could potentially be putting your fatherhood aspect on top of that, which creates it. So, but I'm wondering if you have any sort of tips on how to set the boundaries to make sure that we can speak when we want to speak, but we're not always keeping our mouth shut, that we have to get it out because that's who we are, right?
Well, I actually think that you just described it so well and so healthy, because sometimes we just need to say, hey, look, I'm going to remove the dad hat for a minute. I'm going to put on the, advice hat for employee, those kinds of things. Can I do that? And again, you're still going to ask, but you tell them ahead of time. You don't tell them in the heat of the battle. If there's any kind of a heat of the battle, you don't do that with emotion. You say, hey, let's put some parameters around here. We talk about that in the book when we get to are you helping or enabling? Because I talk a lot about before you get into the heat of the battle, because we're going to have moments, talk about what how do you want me to do this? What would work for you? What would not work? When Rebecca, our middle child, moved back into the house, she moved in for about 2 weeks. And then she goes, hey, I'm going to go get my master's in clinical psych. Could I stay here? And it'll be a lot cheaper. And you guys are kind of good roomies anyway. And I went, sure. But we also knew that the relationship was going to change. So I said to her, so that bathroom up by that's your bathroom. Here's our expectation. We need this clean. We would like to have you have dinner with us at least once a week. Is that cool with you? We're not asking for much. And she goes, yeah. And I know that you keep different hours than we keep. So we just need to be, we're going to be up. We're going to be worried about you. So text us at 11 and let us know. She's probably at a friend's house watching a movie. I mean, she wasn't like a wild and crazy kid. So she said, that's fine. And then I said, now, do you have anything for us? I honestly thought she would say, it's just amazing that I get to hang out with my parents. She didn't say that. She looked at me and she said, Dad, when I have my friends over, a lot of times you just sit down on the couch and just insert yourself and they all love you. But the point is I didn't invite you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a little jacuzzi thing. And so she said, I know Amy invited you to come and sit in, but I didn't invite you. So you came in, you put your trunks on, you're sitting there and you're the life of the party, but I didn't invite you. So I was like, Becca, I am so sorry. But you know what? It was really good to have that because I gave her the opportunity to say that. But I honestly thought she might say something about her mom and not me. And it was like me. Don't just sit unannounced on the couch when my friends are all there. I get that. And I just said, but Becca, thank you so much. And you know what? I was awkwardly, shy about ever inserting because I knew these kids. These kids had grown up with me. She was now back with her friends, where we live, and the kids would engage with me, but I needed to make sure that I did it right. And so I think you
give them space.
So I think you begin to talk about that. Going back to your question, I think you begin to talk about that at different ways. Do you mind if I put on my, different hat here? But we always have the dad hat. That's the hard part, is that we can't change that. We are the dad. They call us dad, and so we have the dad.
Consistent thing is that we're asking questions. I mean, I think that's just an underlying.
Perfect.
What I'm hearing from you, Jim, is 2 ears, one mouth, to use in that proportion. And to have these conversations, it's just questions. That's what I find with my sons right now. It's just in order to have those conversations where we're going to talk about. I just say, hey, how's it going at work? How's it going with your kid? And then let them come forward with as much as they want to, because I got 2 boys. They're not going to generally speak up unless I do something.
Unless you ask those questions. No, asking questions is the right way. And plus listening. Listening is the language of love. So you're showing your boys how much you love them by asking questions about their life in a non-judgmental way. That's what we do. That's how we do it. And it's never going to be perfect, but that's my goodness, I need to write my notes down from you guys because the 2 ears, one mouth is just a great concept for us to think about as we deal with our adult children, as we deal with anybody.
Flipping the script just a little bit on some of that, your principle 3 talking about your child's culture. Yeah, I was impacted by the idea that we should be a student of our children's culture. I mean, that implies putting in effort, taking notes, learning from those things, and receiving that. Again, all of these things that I knew in other realms, I was a manager of folks that were my kids' age. Yeah. And it was just so natural for me to welcome their idiosyncrasies or values and what they contributed that were generational as an employee relationship. It was so natural for me to make room and tolerance for that. But I was just so quick and judgmental and harsh about those same aspects as it related to my own kids. And again, your book was just so good for me to really just immerse myself in that logic. So can you talk any more about the idea of specifically being a student?
No, and this is a hard one. I mean, every principle is kind of a hard principle because it doesn't come natural to all of us. But the principle of becoming students of the culture means that you can be a student of their culture. You're not going to always agree with what that culture has been teaching them or what they've turned out to think about. Let's take, politics or money or Jesus or all those kinds of things. But the truth is, just like you did with the people that you were overseeing in your work, we still have to understand why do they act the way they act, and we can't parent the person that we were or the person that we had hoped they would be. We have to parent them. And I had to learn, why are my kids, they have different thoughts about the church. They have different thoughts about sexuality. And for many, it's a major difference. Ours wasn't as major. They have different thoughts about politics. Well, part of that is because, and I talk about this in that book, but this generation, the millennials and the Gen Z, and that has your kids are falling into that. My kids are millennials, but they were taught that tolerance is a form of loving. So even if they were taught, a parent might be seeing them as violating your values that they grew up with, maybe even straying from faith, but the biggest value that they've heard all of their life is that tolerance is a form of loving. And so they see us, adults, as people who may not love because we don't agree, for example. We have one of our daughters politically is different than especially my wife. I don't talk about politics because I'm in family ministry, so I would lose half of my platform one way or the other. But we've just had to learn that her friends have the same beliefs that she has and whatnot, and we just kind of talk. We talk around that, and we've had to make some rules, even especially with her, of just saying, hey, you know what, this isn't what we're going to talk about at Thanksgiving, and just put it aside. But we also have to realize that they've been raised differently. So I talk about the cringe factor. So when you look at kids today, the average boy sees pornography at age 10. And some people skew it younger. And the average girl, this is what the greatest change in this younger generation is. They see pornography or experience pornography, because sometimes they'll read books or things where they're not just viewing, at 11.8. So that means when it comes to their view of sexuality or gender confusion or whatever, it's really different. So as parents, that doesn't mean that we disagree. I mean, we can agree to disagree if they're not in alignment with what we believe, but we have to understand that's how they probably saw their first and got their first sex education from the internet, not from anything else. So that plays a determining factor. Cohabitation in 1974, there was 75% of the American population, not Christian population, but the whole population, said that they would not live with someone before instead of marriage. Today, it's 75% say that they would live with someone before instead of marriage. So you've got a lot of your peers who are having kids live with their partner beforehand. And that's a very different thing, because and I know that even secular research shows that, less sexual satisfaction, which is crazy. I don't exactly understand why that's the case. Greater chance of divorce, greater chance of adultery if they got married to that person. So and 38 other things. So, we're living in a world where our cultural experiences, they do everything online, oftentimes date online, they shop online, they work online. Just go to Starbucks, wherever you're at, and who's there? It's a younger generation all at work. Okay. Most of us went into the office to work. A lot of them don't. So, but the other thing, understanding the culture, which is really cool, and Homeward, where I work, we're really putting our energy into this, is that for the millennials especially, we don't know enough about Gen Z because they're just at the oldest Gen Zs are just starting to get married. So we don't know what's going to go on with them. But for millennials, the number one thing they want once they get married and make babies is they want to be good parents and they want to have good marriages. So what we're doing at Homeward is we're actually making a pivot to spend more time helping this younger generation have good marriages and have become healthy parents and do a good job parenting, because they're dying for it. But they're not going to listen to a seminar for 3 hours, which Homeward does. We're the largest provider of parenting seminars in the U.S. They're not coming. Okay. They want a 1 minute video. Okay. And could you just do everything on a 1 minute video or a blog that, is 600 words or less, right? So that's where we start. We can then move them to greater education experiences. But so the illustration goes that with answering, I think, your question is we can be students of the culture. We've got to be students of the culture. I mean, Gen Z. So some of the people who are listening, they have Gen Z kids, twice as many atheists. And we're trying to figure all that out right now. The church, both with Gen Z and millennials, they don't trust the church. They see the church as hypocritical and judgmental, and that's what research says. So we can't just say, "Oh no, it's going to be fine." We actually have to understand where they're going in order to come alongside them. That doesn't mean we have to agree, though. And I think where some people have misunderstood my principle of becoming students of the culture is that we embrace everything that goes on in the culture. We don't have to do that. We have to, but we do have to understand, why do they act the way that they act? What is that influence, and why is it so important to them when it's not that important to us? Maybe just the opposite.
Yeah, and Jim, you mentioned in your book a couple of times this phrase called the messy middle.
Yeah.
And this is what you're talking about, is that
Right.
me being a boomer, and Adam here, he's your basic Gen X, and I'm dealing with millennial kids. How do we navigate in order to find that middle place? And when you were telling the story earlier about going over to having your daughter's friends over, and that you jump on the couch,
Right.
and you reference this in your book too, remember that they're adults and we're adults. So put yourself in a situation that if you're in a business situation and you see a business meeting going on, would you plop yourself in the middle of that conversation and say, "Hey, what are you guys talking about?"
That's a great point.
So,
No, this is a great point.
This messy middle that you have is, I think, what is a learning for me from reading your book, which I'm very, very thankful that I did this, and thank you for writing it, is making sure that I see them through the lens of an adult first, even though they're my kids and I love them so much and I want to protect them from everything, because as you referenced, that's my DNA. All right. However, they're an adult and I have to respect their adult position. I have to be understanding of their position towards me, and to have a conversation about it before feelings get hurt, which to me avoids the messy middle.
Sure. And yet there is going to be a messy middle, because you're going to be at the, I was fly fishing with my 3 son-in-laws, and they were having a conversation that was so opposite of what I believed about something. And I've just paid a lot, as you guys know, what it costs to go fly fishing. So it wasn't a cheap, and I'm paying for this. And I wanted to so badly, kind of insert myself, but I went, you know what, we're here to fly fish, and I'll let them, have their conversation and whatever. And I just need to stay in the messy middle, and that's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And
I think you can pick and choose when you want to come in and inject and bring the conversation up. There's going to be time. I had to learn patience. Patience.
Boy, that's a great point.
I'd hear that, and it's just, my gosh, there's going to be a great time when I'm not going to give advice. I'm going to ask a question, I think.
Yeah.
Or, I'm going to, just have the conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the takeaways for our conversation today, I think, is you saying, ask the question, because, that's not judgmental when you ask a question, and how do we learn about the culture? We learn about the culture by asking them, tell me what's going on in the culture. Help me learn that. We're going to learn that from our kids. And, I've always laughed that if I have a conversation where there's good questions, my kids will engage. They sometimes go silent if I'm telling them what I think.
Again, the book is fantastic. Thank you so much. I know a lot of people are going to enjoy this conversation that we had with you today, Jim. Now, you wrote this book in 2019, correct?
Right. Yes.
All right. A lot of things have changed in the world as a result of that thing. Is there anything that because of how our world has changed, that there could be something that you're thinking of now, or of now, that could be an additional aspect to add to this book?
Right. That's a great question. I mean, and again, we've gone through COVID, so we all define ourselves as, well, that was before COVID or after COVID. But think about even our adult children that played probably more into their life. Some of those kids were still in high school or they were in college and they didn't go to graduation, all that. So, yeah, I would say that there are some changes. Some of the things have heightened, some of the technology and social media addictions and things like that, which is fascinating. But I would say some of the things I would add, I'm actually writing another book right now. In fact, it's due quite soon. And this is on what do you do when your kids stray from your values and the harder things. There's even stuff on it with estrangement. 27% of adult children are estranged from at least one family member. That's huge. And you know who the number one is? Dad. Because of different reasons. Yeah, it's fascinating. So I'm even doing one with a section in there with, kind of the mental and emotional health thing, because I felt like I didn't do a good enough job. I would say the other thing that goes along with doing life with your adult children is the empty nest. I was going to put a chapter in there on the empty nest, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. So I ended up writing another book called Finding Joy in the Empty Nest, which I love this book. And business people like this book because there's kind of so how are you going to reinvent your life now that your kids are out of the house?
We call that redirecting.
Yeah, redirecting is perfect. Yeah, no, it's a perfect way of looking at it. Redirect, what you guys are doing on this podcast, the word redirect, it's one of those things that describes what you're talking about on a regular basis. It's awesome. So that's the the not a 25-cent word, not a 50-cent word. That's the $10 word. So it's great. But I would say also a lot of marriages struggle. The graying of divorce. It's the one demographic where divorce is going up. It's 50 and older. And so again, I hardly mentioned that in doing life with your adult children. And I think there's just room for it. This last weekend, for some reason, we don't know why, but Doing Life with Your Adult Children is a bestseller. And it was 108 worldwide on Amazon. It doesn't usually run in that circle. It usually runs about 1,500. So that's, we look at that and just go, whoa, amazing. Because I've written other books and it's not there. But 108 was, and number one in all of the topic categories, which would be for me, the topic categories on Amazon are midlife. So I'm right above, yoga in the midlife. I love that version. Parenting adult children, number one, and number one with Christian and family, which is huge for us. The point that I'm saying is there's such a need out there that I think what you're asking is that, there's more to be said. Now, when I wrote the book in 2019, there were I couldn't find books on this stuff. I couldn't find hardly any articles and blogs. I mean, it was there, but you really had to dig. Today, there is much more of a plethora of things, and a lot of the books are really good. And so on my podcast, I just had a woman last week on estrangement, and it was a really good podcast. It wasn't just for people whose kids were estranged, but it was like, how do you keep them from being estranged? She did a great job. I didn't even know what that word meant in 2000.
Yeah. Jim, you brought up a lot of great comments and a lot of things that we're going to be talking about here on the Redirect podcast, like empty nest, how to reestablish the relationship with your wife. Like, you got to date her again because now the kids are gone. Who is that person that's sitting in the room with me? Right. Because now we're sitting together 24/7, 365 because I don't have to go to work anymore. Right. So you've got a lot of experiences on this, and we're so very thankful that you've spent some time with us here today.
No, my absolute pleasure. You guys are great. Oh, you guys are great. I love what you're doing. It's so needed, and we just hear this all the time as we talk about this subject everywhere. So I love what you're doing. I'm glad I found you.
So Jim, how if we wanted to help other people find you, what's your preferred methods if people come looking for you?
Well, if they're looking at that book, Doing Life with Your Adult Children, they could go to Amazon. It's in Barnes and Noble. It's in kind of everywhere. Or they can go to homeword, WORD.com, and that's the website for our ministry, which is a lot bigger than Jim Burns, but does some great things. We have 4 values: strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. And they can find all kinds. We have courses. We have free. We do a culture brief that is free. It comes out every Friday. We send out 7 million of these things. So people really like it's like a 4-minute read on being a student of the culture. So we've got some great stuff. So they go to homeward.com. They'll see it.
Can they also find your podcast at homeward.com?
They can find podcast at homeward.com. Or if you type in Homeward with Jim Burns, you'll find it on every platform. We've got a YouTube, so they get to see my smiling, bald-headed face, whoever I'm
How do I get my kids to go there, Jim? How do I do that?
I'll buy
Do
you
I
a
leave
steak
book in
dinner
your house?
if you go.
recommend the
Yeah,
podcast?
yeah. No, isn't that funny? Yeah. We still, Kathy and I say that we sometimes bribe without them knowing we're bribing. Like we want to do something, a big weekend in May. So we and it's costing us a ton of money. We just said, hey, who wants to go to Palm Desert on us? We thought maybe the whole family could come. And then we started looking at the numbers and we went, oh, this is costing us a few $1,000s, but they're coming because it's a very nice place to go and we'll pay for the food. So there you go.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for joining us today. You've been an awesome guest.
Great.
And well wishes for your podcast, your book, your future
Thank
book.
you.
Books,
Thanks.
Everything. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, you guys.
Want more information on how to redirect your purpose in retirement? Check out the Redirect-U website at redirect-u.com. Do you have something you want to share? Do you have a question about your redirect strategy? Please email us at info@redirect-u.com. We want to hear from you. Check out the latest Redirect podcast episode, as well as see all of the Redirect episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Until next time, remember, there is purpose in your life, so find it and go do something about it.